Right, we've got about 15 minutes left, so I want to have a quick chat, cut out the rest of you, and talk to Andy here for a couple of minutes. Andy, you came from basically England. What was your background? Did you have any experience, say, in presidential work or anything like that, or committee or football work?
In my time in the UK?
Yeah.
No,
I didn't think so. No, I don't mean that.
But I'll tell you what did happen when I was growing up, when I was a kid. There was a dad of one of my mates who was into everything. Right, he was coach of the local football team. He was chair of the local school board, all this kind of stuff. And my dad didn't get involved as much, but because he was working 6 days a week, pretty much. I used to go down to Everton and watch the game every fortnight with my dad. But Roy. Big influence on my life. So I do try and get involved in lots of things. I've been on school boards and things like that. Forest Field was the latest thing.
What I was getting at, though, is you have had a fair bit of experience in football and always supported it, and probably passionate, as I know you are.
Well, I'm from Liverpool, so
that's what I mean.
It's not a case of whether you like football or not. It's whether you're red or a blue.
Yeah.
That's the only question you're asked.
Exactly.
So I kind of grew up with it, had a season ticket. Every 2 weeks I'd go down the game. Even when I left Liverpool to go to university, I still travelled back.
Yeah.
In the days before I even had a car. And I had a nightmare from Nottingham to...
So, in other words, a football tragic.
Absolutely.
And I know that from our 12 o'clock at night chats over the phone for an hour.
But you see, I think you can be a football fanatic and still not be good on a committee or whatever.
Yes.
And maybe we're seeing that a little bit in some of the organisations in WA and maybe even nationally right now with the FFA. You can be a football fanatic, but it doesn't mean you be good at governing the game or governing the club or whatever. But I've got a lot of business experience too, because
that's what I was coming to now. Yeah. When you've moved to Australia, and when you've been in Australia for a while now, and you worked engineering, whatever you did.
Engineering is what I do. That's what I did, and that was my profession, and that took me around the world. When I came to Australia, I was here for a little while in the engineering industry, and then I kind of quit that. I got a bit bored with the whole thing, and that's when we bought the winery.
And from there on in, you've been running what has turned out to be a very, very successful winery.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not a major business. It's not as big as some of the businesses that these guys are involved with. It's a family business, but we turn over about $3 million a year. So it's not small fry by any stretch of the imagination. And that's taught me a lot as well, because it's a small organisation. It doesn't have volunteers, of course. I pay the employees, but it's very different running a small business than it is being part of a big corporate. Yeah.
Now, through that, then you got involved with the Forest Field. What brought you to Forest Field? Or obviously, we know with the nearest club to you, but why did you go to Forest Field? Was it your children? Was it?
Well, I've got three boys. We were all at Kalamunda, which was the local club to us. When I say local, I mean Forest Field was just like an extra couple of k's down the road, but Kalamunda was the team that we joined when the kids were very young. As simple as my youngest son, Toby, his coach. There was a little bit of disagreement with Kalamunda. Don't really know what was going on at the time over equipment or whatever, and decided to move his team to Forest Field. So he pretty much made the decision for us. So we had 2 kids at Kalamunda, 1 kid at Forest Field. Very quickly, we had all 3 at Forest Field.
And what sort of, when you went to Forest Field, what tempted you to get into the committee side of it? Was it a basket case or what?
You
plain and simple.
You mean did I need therapy or something like this? No. It was a couple of things. First of all, we moved our 2 oldest kids over to Forest Field pretty much straight away because, one, logistically it was quite hard to be ferrying kids around in 2 clubs. 2, Forest Field was a great club. It was a big club. And the atmosphere there was fantastic. The people there were really, really friendly. I bumped into a guy that you might know called Rod Banjak. I was I was looking after the coach of one of my boys' teams didn't turn up for some reason for a Sunday game. So I stepped in, I kind of organised a team, got them on the park, didn't even know their names, right? And then towards the half time, this guy rocked up and started talking to me. I have no idea who he was. We started talking, we had a bit of a laugh. He said, what's going on here? He then took the team for the second half. And we're talking like, I don't know, a South Div 4 team or something like this, right? And we just started talking, and that was Rob Banjak, he was the head coach, technical director. So from then, we just started talking. I found out a bit more about the club. I found out some of the issues that they were going through at the time, certainly at committee level. On the park, it seems to be going.
Like what?
Oh, it's just, I think it's not a particular, it's not particular to Forestfield. I'm sure other clubs experience this, but you get people throwing their hands up. It doesn't go quite right at board level. There's a few arguments, maybe a few disagreements. People throwing the towel after a few months, and then they're left with a fewer number of people on the board who end up volunteering and pretty much doing everything. And that's the way Forestfield seemed to be going. It was always a struggle at board level. There didn't seem to be any kind of cohesion at that level. On the park, it's a different story. Loads of volunteers with coaches and all that kind of stuff, and that was the good stuff. And also, they were about to start construction of the new grandstand,
right,
which was obviously a major project and actually very disruptive in the way the club operates too. So I just I'm one of these people that if I see a problem, I'd like to try and fix it. I started helping out, doing a few things about NPL criteria, making sure that if Forestfield ever did get into a position where they could get juniors in or the senior team, we knew about the criteria. This was like 2 years before we actually got in there.
Yeah.
And then very quickly I realised if I was going to do something, I needed to get on the committee, and very quickly I realised that if I was actually going to do something, then I needed to put my hand up for president.
Yeah. So how long were you at the club before you actually decided to get on the committee?
About 6 months.
6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So no one knew me.
Yeah.
And that was the hardest part for me, because Forestfield's a very close-knit community.
I was just going to say, how did they react to you?
Look, very positively. I think that it was a club that was used to having the president from within the club that had been there for years and that kind of stuff, which is fine. I don't mind that. But I was there for 6 months with my boys. They were calling for names, so I put my name forward, and a lot of people said, "Who the hell are you?" A lot of people who, because I was obviously involved with the junior side of the club, I knew a lot of parents there,
yeah,
and the junior parents were generally the people that didn't go to AGMs. They didn't vote. They didn't really care too much about how the club operated. It was all the people who were involved with the senior side that used to do that. So a lot of people that knew me weren't voting, and a lot of people that didn't know me were voting. So I had to basically go out and tell them who I was and the kind of things that that I wanted to try and do and the kind of problems that we wanted to fix.
Do you think that was a good thing in a way? You know, again, you weren't.
Well, absolutely.
Familiar?
Well, what actually happened was we ended up having three names for president. I think one of them dropped out. He was the sitting president who decided to step down. So we actually had an election. And before the election, we actually had a campaign where we had people, myself and this guy called Brad, who was basically going to online, going to meetings, meeting people in the bar, things like this, and talking to them about the club. He had a couple of different ideas to me. I'm not saying mine were better or not, but the thing was we had a debate, right? And when we got people involved, and we had then we had an election. I think there was the biggest turnout we've had in the AGM for a long time. So I think that's a healthy position to be in. When you've got a couple of people who want to, rather than the old situation where you're in an AGM, there's 40 people there who want to be the next president. Everyone takes a step back, and the guy or the girl that's slowest is the one that becomes president. And a lot of clubs operate like that.
Yeah.
So I thought it was really healthy.
So when you became president, did you have in your mind, obviously you had some manifesto to get in as president. How did that manifesto go that you had?
Well, look, I think the first and foremost what I wanted to do was I wanted to make sure that the board and the business side of the club was operating as professionally as what appeared to be on the pitch. So, and I think we achieved that. I got some great committee members in that first year. I think the treasurer that stepped down as we took over was doing some great work. The club traditionally hadn't been very well financially run. It was getting better. But then we just took that and built on it. So I think our meetings were brief. They weren't 3 hours. They were an hour. We had an agenda. We had minutes of meetings. We communicated well.
Did you post the minutes of the meetings, or was it just...
I started to. They're on our website somewhere. But to be honest, with every topic that we spoke about at a board meeting, if it impacted the rest of the club, we'd communicate that anyway.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a case of, oh, here's the minutes, go and read the minutes, or they're a bit boring anyway. But if something happened as a decision, we'd then social media it, or Facebook, or website and things like that, or just communicate around the grounds on training nights.
So did you have and we always refer to our governing bodies needing this business plan, but at club level, it's very difficult to have a business plan unless you've got a business-minded group running the club as a total unit. Did you actually have, let's call it a style of business plan that you could meet those indicators and say, yes, we've ticked off those 2 boxes, now let's get on with the next?
Right, so what you're saying, did we have a plan that we were working to? Now, we had a business plan that was drawn up by a previous committee member. I didn't actually edit that. I just put that to one side.
Yep.
It was actually pretty clear. 2 years is a very short period of time. It was very clear that what we needed to do at Forest Field, one, I wanted to get the board operating a lot more professionally, more business-like, not forgetting the fact that you're a community club, of course. Yep. Second thing is we had to make sure the grandstand was managed, the build of the grandstand. So that was a huge project.
Yep.
And the third thing is I wanted to get the juniors in the NPL.
Yep.
However, we could do that. Because that's a game changer for a club like Forest Field.
So did you put the emphasis more on juniors than seniors?
No, we.
Equal.
Well, you try and be equal. I mean, for instance, when we came in, the season had just been completed. It was a State Division 1, our first team, and we paid about a quarter of the salary cap to the players. We immediately went up to salary cap, and then obviously we got promoted into the NPL via a playoff. And then we immediately went to salary cap again. So in the space of basically 12 months, we'd, I think, times 7 or times 8 the amount of money that we were paying the players. And we didn't take from juniors or other sections of the club.
That's what I was going to say.
So that was raised
basically, unlike some of the clubs around, because we know some of the clubs supplement the seniors with the juniors' fees, did you take any of the juniors' fees towards the seniors?
No. What we tried to do, and this wasn't too much of a departure from what happened in the past, by the way. What we tried to do is we tried to treat every single part of the club almost as its own cost centre.
Yes.
So that if the masters' fees were coming in and the amateurs' fees were coming in and the women's fees, that money then would cover the cost of what it cost to run that part of the club. It was the same with the juniors. Now, with so many juniors, there was always a little bit left over. We tried to plough that back into like end of season junior wind-ups and things like that. But at the end of the day, we created a budget. I wanted a surplus at the end of each year so that we had a bit of a contingency fund, and that would come from all parts of the club.
Yeah.
And we increased the player wages because we could fund it through sponsorship and outside investment, which is great.
Now, without getting in, well, yes, let's get into you got the stadium built, you got the grandstand built. Big opening, fantastic setup, fantastic. But I remember saying to you at the time, you need to keep NPL here for this.
We actually opened the grandstand when we were in State Division 1.
I know, yeah.
But of course, it was a little bit late, so it was about 4 or 5 weeks into the season. That season we then finished second, and we beat Mandurah in a playoff. That got us promoted. So the first season in NPL, which was last season, was the first season we'd had the grandstand open from the start. I mean, it was a nightmare putting that grandstand in place. We had a fantastic support with government, with funding, from the constructors and all this kind of stuff, the construction crew. But we couldn't get access to the clubhouse.
Because that was going on.
For about 6 months. So revenue was down, all this bar revenue was down. We had to get access through an emergency exit in the rec centre and things like that. So it doesn't sound like, it's not an obvious problem, but it was a massive problem for us because a lot of our revenue came from the bar. Obviously, you've seen the facility, so there's a lot of people that use it.
And $8 pints of Bulmers.
It helps, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah. And so basically then you eventually got the grandstand going and revenue started to pick up. How was the feelings within the club at that stage?
In terms of...
the whole morale of the club, everything.
Well, I've been involved with the club. When we opened the grandstand, I've probably been involved with the club about a year, maybe a little bit longer. And the mood I felt at the time was the best I'd felt in the whole club. the year before there was a few little issues around the bar and that kind of stuff with staffing. It felt a little bit like the club was. There were factions in the club.
Yeah.
I think with the grandstand that was a very visible and obviously a high expense item, which kind of focal pointed the whole club and brought everyone kind of almost reminded we were all part of one club again. And it's a great facility. I mean, you've seen the grandstand. Yeah. Most people have seen it on the internet, on the live streams and stuff. It's a pretty magnificent facility. So I think just reminded everyone that we're all part of one club, and it kind of pulled everyone in the same direction, which is great.
When you done it down, put the new infrastructure in and all that, and I've noticed it, like Perth have done it, and Inglewood. And,
yeah.
But did it increase the crowds coming to the game?
No, I don't think the grandstand itself increased the level of support. It's certainly we certainly used the fact that we had a grandstand to increase our social media presence and our PR and our advertising. Forest Field's always been traditionally a very, very well supported club. Yeah. We used to have the grassy bank there before. That used to be full with people. And so with the grandstand, we could accommodate that same number of people, but comfortably. I think what increased the number of people watching is the fact that we're going so great in State Division 1, playing some great football. You remember in 3 seasons we got promoted from State Division 2. We stayed 1 season in State Division 1. I think we got promoted the next season to NPL. So there was a lot of success on the park, which is what I said when I first put my hand up for president. I wanted to match the success on the park in the boardroom.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted to do.
At that time was coming together, wasn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. It was a great ride to be part of.
Now, and we're out of time tonight,
yeah.
And we will go on to part 2 next week.
When I can stay longer if you want.
Well, no, the listeners want to go to bed.
Yeah. Yeah. But what I was going to say, we will get on to how success off the pitch was not matched by success on the pitch next week, and what you did.
So what you're talking about is the first NPL season, relegation,
let's just keep going. We might as well just keep going.
Fair enough.
All right. So we get into the situation where we've got the NPL. We're in the NPL now at this stage. We've got a brand new grandstand.
Yep.
We start off with a fantastic performance against Florrie in the first round of the.
Yeah, which was the draw, but we ended up getting 3 points.
We ended up getting 3 points.
Forfeits in for fielding and registered players or something, Don.
Yeah,
not doing paperwork properly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you then went into the situation where you were also heavily involved in live streaming, and we started off the live streaming setup with Let's Talk Football.
If I'm honest, the promotion to NPL of our senior team happened probably a year or 2 sooner than I would have expected. The jump from State Division 1 to NPL was huge in terms of money. Well, as I said, we increased our salary cap, so that was double pretty much the state.
But also, you had to increase your income, you were saying, or your expenditure went basically overall, not only on players, but also on fees and all like that. What was the difference?
Well, we had the juniors entering NPL for the first time. We had the seniors entering NPL for the first time. There's a little bit of difference to organising an NPL seniors game on a match day than there is from organising a state division. A lot of those things, plus the fact, the committee that I was involved with, that I had around me, was still relatively new. So it was a lot of new things, a lot of big things, and I wouldn't say we struggled. It was just a lot of hard work because of the success on the field. So I'm not complaining by that at all, but it did put a lot of pressure on the board. But I thought we did really, really well, and we tried to do new things like live streaming. I don't think any of the club was doing it at the time, and so you and I got talking one time. I saw your crappy live stream using your phone, and we decided to get together and see what we could do.
Yeah,
and I thought we did a pretty decent job
within the club structure working full time. Like Perth, for instance. Perth have a
secretary in
office for 5 days.
When I say no, I mean
the expansion.
I think pretty much all the volunteers on the committee work full time.
Yeah,
and I know
paid. We're talking about paid.
The only paid employees were the bar staff.
Yeah, and that was only
bar and canteen staff.
And you have somebody full time at the ground every day.
Oh, look, if you have the luxury of all that cash in the bank, John, you'd love a volunteer organisation to be able to rely on 1 or 2 full-time employees running the business side of it. But it's just not viable at that level. I mean, that was one of the things I was trying to work towards, increase the level of money coming into the club, So you could afford to have people like that.
So
Facility manager.
basically, as I say, the team started off, they were doing reasonably well, got a couple of injuries, a couple of suspensions, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And they started to fall apart, basically. That's what it...
Well, halfway through the season, I think we were mid-table. So a little bit like what Rockingham are doing this year.
Yeah.
And then
Now,
I think in the last half of the season, we got 2 points
that's
from 11
what
games.
I was going to say. So
Or 13
basically,
games, rather.
as president,
Yeah.
I suppose you would take... president and the coach takes the blame for it all. Would you have felt that maybe you took your eye off the on-field side of things because there was so much to do in the off-field?
Well, my eye was never on the on-field side of things in terms of me making decisions or anything like that. So my job was to support the coaching infrastructure we had in place and to try and provide money.
All right. Do you think you have the proper coaching infrastructure in place? Like, did you have a separate director of coaching to head coach?
We didn't have a separate technical director to head coach. It was one and the same as Rod. I think, yes, we
Do you think that might have been a problem?
No, I don't think.
Okay.
I think technical direction for me is more important when you're looking at junior development and making sure that the junior development actually matches the style that you want the seniors to play, and that was already in place.
Did you have a football ops manager? Someone there to guide your coaches?
Yeah.
We didn't have a position of football ops manager. We did have someone on the committee that looked after the senior side of the game.
For me, that was,
but that was more of a facilities kind of person. They would look after like match day and things like that. Looking back, there's hindsight, and I've started to learn how other clubs operate now as well, especially at the NPL level.
Yeah.
So there's look, we didn't get everything right. Don't get me wrong, and we did struggle. But you're asking me, do we have the right coaching staff in place? Of course we did. We'd just come off 2 promotions in 3 seasons. And it's, so we had a lot of confidence in what we were doing on the field and a lot of confidence in the players. And what you've got to remember as well is those players were relatively young bunch. Most of them were Forestville homegrown.
Yeah.
And the day they beat Mandurah in that second leg of the playoff, they changed Forestville United as a community club forever because the juniors got into the NPL.
That's right.
So that's a debt of gratitude I owe those players, the Reece Loxleys and Liam Merrigans and Sandy Sinclairs and all those kind of people.
Nobody can say it was basically, I think, looking at it, they were just 1 or 2 players short to be able to actually, like, you didn't make an awful lot of change from the team that came out of the...
We added about 3 or 4 players into the squad.
Basically,
right.
I think everybody will tell you, in hindsight, and even clubs now are recommending that anybody that goes up from State Division 1 to NPL, you've got to invest heavily in players.
Yeah, and look, you're probably right. I mean, in fact, you probably are right because we ended up getting relegated.
That's right. Well, you look at Balcatta this year. They've invested relatively heavily in getting players, and they're not even ones that they've been in the NPL for a while.
How many players did Rockingham bring in when they got promoted this season?
I'm not 100%.
Yeah, they didn't bring in that many.
That's right.
Maybe 4 or 5. But look, they brought in
They got a few of
the right
Phoenix
players.
players.
Yeah.
From day one.
We actually settled into life in the NPL. I think pretty well. Yeah, in the second half of the season, I think the wheels came off a little bit. Sometimes. If you're in the boardroom or myself as the role of the president, you might get a little bit too close to these things because you lose a game, then you lose another game, and you think next week we'll get the 3 points, and then we'll be back mid-table again. And it didn't quite.
And
happen.
the thing about it was you were 1 win away from salvation.
And if you think about it as well, our first season in the NPL was the season that they were relegated 3.
That's right. Oh yeah. Look, I agree. But we discussed this.
Any other season, Jindal United go down with 5 points, everyone else stays up.
Yeah. Well, but we discussed this and we said, and I remember at the time everybody at the club was of the same thing. We have to stay in the NPL. We have to get. I think at one stage you were targeting actual matches that you really did have a chance of winning.
That's right.
But is it a case of...
and I was wrong on all of them.
Yeah.
In the case, Andy, though, is it like, as from an advice point of view, try not to win things too quickly?
Look,
lay a few foundations first?
I think you're absolutely right, John. If you, with the benefit of hindsight, if you wanted to go back and look at Forest Field in the last 5 years, you'd probably say slow down a bit. Let's get a couple of seasons under our belt with the new grandstand, with all that kind of stuff, with the new facilities. Let's get a couple of seasons under our belt in State Division 1.
You've already got,
but
and the next benefits will be coming.
Yeah, but look, you can't go out and say to your head coach or say to your team, don't get promoted this season, guys, because we just like a bit of a respite for a year.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
Yeah.
You go with the flow, and the Rod and the players put the board under pressure by succeeding, and it was nice pressure. Don't get me wrong, we enjoyed the ride. We just didn't quite make it in the.
Now we
the
come to
first
the
season.
second transfer window, or the transfer window.
All right.
And Forestfield did not go into the transfer window. They did not. They were. It was obvious at that stage to just about everybody that you needed to strengthen. Why didn't you strengthen?
Rod didn't come back to me with any names. I think there was a couple bubbling, but he was the right person to come into the squad wasn't available, or he didn't feel.
Are you sorry now at this stage after what happened that you didn't overrule him?
You know, Rod, it's quite hard to overrule Rod.
As I say, are you sorry at this stage that you didn't overrule him?
I would have done a couple of things differently for sure.
I spoke to Rod a couple of times when he reached out to me, just asking for a bit of advice, and I know that he was doing his damnedest to attract players to Forest.
Absolutely, yeah.
The tyranny of distance, as Armidale also found, was the biggest problem in drawing clubs who. Players from clubs who basically just offered more, or they were closer to home. So that was the problem you had.
Look, that's right. I mean, we also had a situation in the transfer window where we had another club who pretty much approached one of our players and the last couple of days of the transfer window, and he was obviously quite an influential player in the squad. And that kind of turned his head. Now, we fought that approach off. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. Maybe I should have just let him go and then brought someone else to replace him. But it was the last 24 hours of the transfer.
Exactly.
It was very, very short notice.
And you weren't going to get anybody to replace him.
Well, probably not.
But, again, sort of...
But that turned his head, and basically, I would say the next 5 weeks, 6 weeks...
Yeah, he did.
He wasn't around the club and then came back and wasn't the same player after that.
And I don't think also that from a coaching point of view that somebody's alarm has gone off. From a coaching point of view, that the suspension of Rod on a couple of occasions.
There's a few things that happened which again all kind of conspired to distract what was going on the field. Rod with a couple of social media comments about salary caps and about a certain club or clubs. Pretty much everyone knew that it was happening in the league, but Rod was one of the few people that actually said it. Unfortunately, said it on Facebook, and was done by Football West. I thought the punishment was a bit harsh.
Yes, I think everybody did.
It was a 4-week ban, and I don't think we picked up any points when
That's right. In fact, I don't think in any of the matches that he was suspended was any points picked up.
Yeah. But wouldn't you think, though, as well, is that is the responsibility of the individual?
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, when you're holding a position like whether it was Andy or whether it was Rod or whether it was Bobby.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact is that as soon as you say something that's derogatory, they'll jump on you because they'll look at that as you being an experienced person in the game who should have known better.
Oh yeah,
You know what I mean?
there's no doubt about that.
But it's usually the club then who ends up suffering the consequence.
And also, you made a serious moral decision at the beginning of the season that you were going to stick strictly to the salary cap.
Correct.
Are you now, I know you're a moral person and all like that, but in hindsight, are you sorry you stuck to the salary cap? Because it was obvious, I think, that...
I'm not sure you could describe it as a moral person. That makes me sound like I'm whiter than white and all that kind of stuff. I'm not.
Oh, God, you're not that.
But,
you're blue.
But, yeah, exactly. But football's a game, and you play by the rules, right?
Yeah, but there was only 3 clubs that played by the rules. One...
So everyone else cheated, right? And you're asking me, with hindsight, would I have cheated? No.
I think the thing is, as well, Eamon, is that Andy's job and any other chairman or president or coach, scenic, whoever it is, their loyalty is to their club, and they'll be very careful of how they express the wishes of their club. And it might not please, your support base and things like that.
Oh, I think it would have pleased the support base if they stayed in the NPL.
Absolutely.
Oh,
by any means.
Yeah, but the comments that come from the club are very important.
Look, I think for me there was never a question, and I don't think there was a question for the committee either that was working with me at the time, that we were going to contemplate breaking the salary cap. I'll be perfectly honest, we probably couldn't have broke it by that much anyway. We probably could have gone half again. But you hear some stories about other clubs paying. We couldn't compete with that.
Yeah.
And also Forest Field at the time, they'd grown up by developing their own kids, and maybe they'd left when they were teenagers, but they'd come back. So that was the kind of environment that we were in. If we'd have broken the rules and spent on a salary cap, would we be in MPL right now? Who knows? Bayswater have just shown right now this season that you spend a fortune, and it still doesn't guarantee success, right?
Yeah, but you were sadly lacking goal scoring.
Yeah.
You created chance after chance after chance.
Well, we sadly were lacking goal scoring, but we didn't lack a goal scorer, because Sonny Sinclair, I think, finished third or fourth in the MPL.
Sonny fell out of favour with Rod.
And we didn't get enough goals from around the rest of the team.
Sonny did fall out of favour with Rod.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Well,
he was dropped a couple of times when nobody could understand why he was dropped.
Yeah.
So, we don't see what goes on at training or anything like that. But, and one goal scorer is not enough. You need the backup.
Absolutely.
So why didn't we go after one when there was one available?
What you're saying is, why didn't we go after Gavin Knight when you told me about Gavin Knight?
Yeah.
I told Rod about Gavin Knight, and it was his decision whether to go for him or not.
In hindsight, are you sorry you didn't press him?
Well, you look at Gavin Knight now playing for Balcatta, and the goals he's scoring, and I think
and he's also performing very well for Balcatta.
Yeah, and I think
that's a year later.
And when we didn't pick him up, I think which second division side did he go to?
Swan.
And he was banging him in there as well.
Yes.
So yeah, of course I regret it.
And
you live in there.
Yeah,
you do live in there. It was the one that got away, wasn't it?
It didn't get away because we never had him.
Yeah, but you know what I mean.
You also got to learn to deal with those kind of situations.
Yeah, but that's the problem, John.
You don't make it a problem. You just put it aside and say, okay, we missed out on this one. We look for the next options.
I'm a football fanatic, but I'm a business-minded football fanatic. So I basically concentrated my skills in the areas which I thought they could go, which is definitely on the business side.
So why did you resign? 6 weeks, because everybody was sort of saying, hang on, here he is, deserting the sinking ship. 6 weeks from the end of the season, we're in trouble, and the president, El Prezo, decides to piss off.
Okay, so there's two main reasons. First
of all...
Was
it because you're from Liverpool?
No. That would have made me more inclined to stick around. Basically two reasons. First of all, a family thing. I got 3 boys. Two of them, they were all 3 at Forest Field. 2 of them decided they weren't going to play club football in the second season. They did compulsory sports at school, which is soccer. And so I had one, my youngest, and he told me halfway through the season that he wanted to try out for other junior MPL clubs. Even though Forest Field were a junior MPL club, it was their first season.
Why did he want to change?
Why?
Yeah.
Because the perception is there are other junior MPL clubs out there that are better, bigger, more established than clubs like Forest Field, clubs like Inglewood, clubs like Fremantle, maybe, things like that, the newer junior MPL clubs. And, he's probably right. It was very early in the junior MPL journey for Forest Field. I'm sure Forest Field will actually become a good junior and a great junior MPL club. But for Toby, he's 12 years old, right? So he doesn't have much time to wait. So that was one reason. And the other reason is when I met Rod when I bumped into him before I became president, we had a shared vision, we had a shared direction, and a lot of commonality. In my first year and a half as president, Rod's opinion of me was I was the person helping him and allowing him to do the things he wanted to do on the pitch. And it worked really, really well as a team. Halfway through the season, that changed. And I went from being the person who could help him make things happen to I was the problem.
Did you feel that yourself?
Yeah, well, we used to have...
No, in the sense that did you feel you were a problem for him? Or did he explain to you why he felt you were a problem?
Yeah, I mean, just the normal decisions you make during the course of the week, who plays on the main pitch other than the first team, whether the amateurs are going to play on it this week or the women or whatever. Those decisions, which were never an issue up to that point, became an issue. And so the small things. And I put that down to the fact that the team's performance wasn't going very well. There's a lot of pressure on Rod. There's a lot of stuff happening in his family life as well.
But were you able to sit down and discuss that with him?
And mate, we used to talk, buddy, 5, 6, 7 times a week for an hour or two. But if you know Rod, and if you know Rod well, once you get to be in his bonnet, it was actually quite difficult. So at first we were talking and we were fixing things, and then it became to a point where we were talking and then we couldn't fix it. And then we'd leave the conversation, and then the next day we'd have the same conversation, and the next day. And I realised very quickly I was becoming a distraction for Rod and taking his focus off what was supposed to be happening on the field. So it was a choice on my part, I suppose. I already knew my youngest was going to leave the club, so I would have no kids there. Do I walk away and remove the problem from Rod so that he could actually focus on what we needed to do, or do we get rid of Rod and replace him with another coach? I chose the former.
Did you
in hindsight?
I don't miss the amount of time and effort that I put into that.
But for the club's, from the club's point of view?
Do you think if I decided to stay and we'd asked Rod to step down and replace him, who knows? Because who would you have got at that point? Who was available at that point? I think the only person that might have been available was Howard Tweets, because he just got fired from Floria. You probably wouldn't want to pick him up, but who else was available? I'm not really too sure, to be honest.
Yeah, but you didn't. Did you even contemplate that?
Well, put it this way. Yes, I did. Put it this way. The decision I made for me to walk to allow Rod to go and do it, that didn't work. So, with hindsight, yes, I would have liked to have tried the other option to see if that would work, but that mightn't have worked either.
Would you ever go back into presidential work of the club?
I think yes is the answer to that, and I would love to, because I'm a football fanatic, but I like to think I'm pretty smart at the business and that kind of stuff. So obviously a committee role or president role is the thing that suits me personally. Doing that with a young family is really, really hard, because I was putting 40, 50 hours a week in after they'd gone to bed and all this kind of stuff, and I've got a business too. So that was hard. So what I would do is, if I was ever going to go back into it, I would wait until my kids had grown up a little bit more, maybe gone to uni and that kind of stuff, and left home.
I was going to say, what would be different if you went back into doing a presidency?
I think there was a couple of times where I was at Forest Field where I would probably be more inclined to try and keep the peace and try and placate people to make sure there's harmony moving forward. I think the thing I've learned, or one of the things I would take with me into doing something in the future, is sometimes you've got to be a bit more ruthless and actually make a decision and just stick to it and go for it.
Did you feel you got close to people like that?
Pardon me?
Did you feel you got close to people like that?
I think we had a great community at Forest Field. I think we all rallied round very quickly, and we all had a single direction. I mean, it's easy to have a great atmosphere when you're winning.
Yeah.
It's harder to have it when the pressure's on. And look, even though we struggled in the NPL, the atmosphere at the club is great, because the club is more than just the senior side.
Are you glad you had the experience of being the president?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a fantastic ride. Could I have been the one who went back down to State Division 1 to then try and build it again to bring it back up? I don't think so, because I was already spending a lot of hours there. Yeah. So,
all right. Listen, Andy, thank you for being here.
You didn't ask me any tough questions. You told me you were going to ask me loads of tough questions.
Part two.
Oh, part two.
No, that's good. Look, we knew there was conflict there going around.
But I wouldn't say it was conflict. It was more of a separation of
ideals
and the direction.
I still reckon you screwed up by not signing a proper player.
Well, you're obviously quite right, because we got relegated.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the good thing about it for Andy was he took up the challenge.
That's right, and had a crack.
And he can come back again.
No,
he still got the appetite to come back.
But the only problem with that is he threw in the towel.
Well, if there's a next time, they'll know how to deal with it.
Yeah.
Well, see, I understand what you're saying there, and no one likes a quitter, but for me at the time, I thought I was doing the right thing at that time.
For the club.
Because
No one's bigger than the club.
we had about, I think, 6 games to go. I wanted to do something that would allow Rod to focus. I also wanted to do something before our AGM to allow someone to come
The only
forward.
thing I would say on all of that, and this is the final word,
Yeah.
because I have the final word, and that is everybody could see that Rod himself wasn't really focused. And that's not his fault. That was family tragedy, etc.
And maybe, because I'm now going to have the last word, maybe with hindsight that would that'd be different, because
Okay.
he's a very good friend of mine.
That's right.